Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, once again, back with the boys, Manny Lagos and Jon Marthaler of the Star Tribune. Guys, how are we doing? It's been a while since we chatted. It's been a little over a month. We've still got, 30 days exactly until the regular season gets kicked off again. But how are we doing today on this fine morning, Manny Lagos?
Oh, thank you very much. It is a fine morning. It went from 19 below a couple days ago to 19 above. No, it's a happy new year. I'm excited for the year. I think it feels like it flew by. It feels like we were just talking about the recap and the tough loss in LA and like just, the season recap show, which again had some nice moments, had some bittersweet, but then you flip and right now it's like 4 or 5 weeks out from opening day. It's unbelievable. And my brain is like for the soccer world, super excited. Super excited about the guys starting preseason, excited about the club and where we're going, and looking forward to the show today.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have the quick turnaround and not have to dwell on a disappointing way the season ended, rather than have what the NFL has, where you lose disappointingly at the end of the season for most teams, and you have 9 months to wait until you can get started again, John. It's a short preseason, very short, as Manny Lagos pointed out, but I think I'd rather have that than the extended 9 months off.
Well, this being soccer and the way the world is headed, we're not too far away from the season just starting the next week after the season ends. Like there'll be MLS Cup and then the next season will just start the following week. Like Mexico is almost already in that situation with their half seasons where it's just like, yeah, the playoffs were today and the season starts tomorrow.
MLS season wraps up with the MLS Cup, and then MLS is back 1 week later.
This is our season wrap-up / preview podcast as we talk about week one.
So as we dive into this episode, we got plenty to talk about. U.S. men's national team in action over the past week, preseason memories, preseason happenings to discuss, off-season roundup to discuss across the league and with the Loons. Boys, before we start, though, I want to get a catch-up with you guys since it's been a month. What's your off-seasons been like? What have you guys been doing since the last time we talked? I know we had the holidays, and now we're in the preseason mode, but Manny, I'll start with you. What's your off-season been like?
It was good. I have two boys in college now, so I'm an empty nester, and the holidays are important because I get to have the kids home. We did go to Albuquerque for a couple days and visit the mother-in-law for Christmas, but overall it was really good. Mostly at home, mostly with the boys, and trying to enjoy family life like we used to before they went to college. But again, it went by fast. That's the one thing I'll say. It felt like it was a nice break, but it felt quick for sure.
Yeah, for sure. John?
Yeah, my life is the exact opposite of Manny's in the sense that I have a second grader and a preschooler. So Christmas break lasted 6.5 weeks. I don't know if that was anybody else's experience, but that's about how long it lasted. It took absolutely forever, and it's what's the opposite of empty nesting? Full nesting. That's what you're up to when you have a second grader and a preschooler. So it's always a whirlwind. That's probably the only thing that's the same. It goes fast. It just goes fast.
John, I'm in the same exact boat as you.
Yeah.
I mean, got a third grader and a preschooler, and yeah.
Yep. Manny's talking about, oh, it's just great to have him home and blah blah blah, and both of us, like, our eyes are twitching right up here. Like,
I love the honesty, though. It's true.
Yep.
Working from home and having the kids home every day, there can be some major issues with it.
Yeah,
for sure.
I can't wait till like 10 years from now I can say things like, man, it was such a blessing. I just really appreciated that time with them, because right now it doesn't always feel that way. It does sometimes, but not always.
Yeah, every night cleaning up the house because the kids have destroyed it. Yeah, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. I'll miss it, certainly, but let's dive into some of this U.S. men's national team action, because that's the most recent thing to talk about for sure. U.S. getting a big win last night against Costa Rica, a 3-0 win, a 3-1 win over Venezuela a couple days ago. What have been your guys' general takeaways from the January camp and what you've seen on the field, Manny?
First of all, I'm not going to buy into this snooty, like, look at the level, blah, 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 because I freaking love watching young players put on the uniform, put on the crest for the first time. time of the year where it's really hard to stay in shape and fit. So it's going to be chunky whether you're playing in Europe or you're playing in MLS. Uh, and I really, once again, always say, the first 10 minutes, I'm like that old cranky guy. Come on, soccer's got to be better. But by the end of both these games, I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching the players. I enjoyed watching, some of the guys who've been doing really well in MLS and some young up and coming guys that maybe even my brain is like they probably don't deserve to be there, but they're fighting and put on the crest. So it was a really fun 2 games, and it was fun to see Pochettino embrace the January camp, which is controversial. And I'm always happy for more soccer and U.S. soccer this time of the year. So
It seems like Manny, you want to lead towards the controversial topic of the January camp, the inclusion of Matko Miljevic, the guy without a club who's been let go from a number of teams.
And why doesn't he have a club, Jonathan? Let's just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it's all of that. Let's start bringing in people that are out of contract at the January camp that we don't know. At least 1 or 2 players have to be something unique like that every time. So Jon Marthaler is like, wait, who is this guy? And I give him a story, low-hanging fruit to write about.
I really feel like we're glossing over this a little bit. Matko Miljevic does not have a contract because Montreal terminated his contract because he was playing in a French indoor league when he wasn't supposed to be. Not only that, he got banned from the league for going to a game he wasn't even playing in, apparently, allegedly, spitting on a player and getting in a fight. And the whole time he wasn't using a fake name, but he decided that the way he was going to hide this was instead of registering as Matko Miljevic, his name on the league website was Matko Milovic. Just the worst. It was like if Manny registered as Manny Lagoose and was like, no, it's not me. It's not me. He was using the same picture. He was using his actual picture, but like, no, that's what. Look at the names; they're spelled slightly different. That's not me. How could that be me?
I love that. We need more of this. By the way, didn't he get booted from his team in Argentina as well? Isn't that why Pochettino took him? He's out there playing in Argentina.
Yeah, he was playing with, I believe, Newell's Old Boys, wasn't he? And he got his contract terminated with them. Manny, in your years of being involved in soccer in America, have you seen anything close to something like this? Because this is a wild situation that when the roster sheet came out and his name was there, that was the immediate talk. It wasn't the talk of, hey, it's cool to see some of these young guys in MLS and elsewhere get their chance at the U.S. men's national team. Is what's Pochettino doing bringing this guy in who doesn't have a team, who's been let go of by a number of teams? Have you seen anything like this or anything? Can you recall anything close to something like this?
I mean, unfortunately, I've got a lot of the gray hair. You got to remember, you're talking about national teams from the 80s and 90s where, it was extension of college soccer and pre-internet. So there's Jonathan, a deep dive where there's going to be more stories and have been by 1,000. But what I would say is I like the fact that Pochettino is taking whoever he wants right now, and he's letting people know, and he's talked about it. Said, listen, I want you to play at the highest level possible. I want to take the players from the best clubs around the world. But A, you need to be playing. B, there's a lot of leagues out there that I'm going to have no stone unturned, and I'm going to take a look at guys. And again, am MLS centric in a lot of ways because our league is growing and is exciting. It's getting great talent, and we need even more young American players to fight to get into that MLS family, to get minutes here, because I think it will help the national team. So ultimately, there's a part of me that really likes this exercise, Pochettino, because it's a nice reminder that no rock should be unturned to try to find talent and value. And if our national team coach sees something in a kid, we maybe should take a deep breath and allow ourselves to see, well, what does he see in him? What kind of explosiveness, speed, like maybe even hunger and craziness and grit that he's trying to present to these guys that, hey, there's a guy who will, go play indoor soccer illegally to try to make it as a pro soccer player. There might be some value to that, in some weird, messed up way.
There's such an age divide in American soccer with the answer to that question, because like me and you, Jonathan, are like, can you believe this happened? And you asked Manny, and he didn't say this, but his answer was basically, listen, I played in the 80s and 90s. I've punched so many guys during indoor soccer. you can't even believe the number of people I punched during indoor soccer games.
Yeah.
And it's not like, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jonathan. Yeah, go.
And it's not like he played bad. I mean, he scored a goal, assisted on another in the first game, came on.
That I saw a cut up of his first half highlights from that first game.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It was like a guy learning to work the controller when he's playing FIFA from the first time.
That's fair. I mean, you get on the score sheet, and I mean, he did. He scored a goal. I believe had an assist as well. So I mean, he showed that I guess somewhat he belonged in this camp at least. Whether that progresses in further camps is doubtful. We'll see. But another interesting move by Pochettino early on. I think the star for me of this camp was Diego Rubio. I mean, obviously he gets all the pictures yesterday. Jack McGlynn as well.
Diego Luna.
Diego Luna. I do that too. I do that every time.
It was written down as Diego Rubio, and I meant Diego Luna.
Yeah.
Diego Luna, the star of the camp, as well as Jack McGlynn. I think those two guys had probably the best camps of anybody in this January.
Our D3 forward did pretty well. 2 goals in 2 games. Charlotte FC forward.
Yeah, Patrick Agerman did well as well. Who, other than those guys, I mean, if you want to sing the praises of Patrick Agerman, who else do you think had a good camp and who showed out well in this one?
I mean, it might be sensitive to this market, but Caden Clark had a good couple games. I mean, he presented himself very well, and getting that goal really put him in a light with Pochettino that at least he's got, a chance to get called to camps.
Assuming Pochettino saw the highlights because he was in the bathroom when Clark scored his goal, but I mean, I assume the coaches go back and watch the highlight. The best part was when Pochettino came back out, the announcer, I've forgotten the announcer's name, sorry, but he was like, oh, he's talking to some of the fans. And I want to believe Pochettino came back out of the tunnel, was like, we scored. Hey, guys, the guys in row 2, who scored? What happened? Hey, fill me in. Was it a good one? It was a good one. All right. That's the Pochettino scouting report. I got to say, Diego Luna, he's a hard guy not to love, partially because he's one of the few guys in this January camp that has like a unique look, like a memorable look about him. Cause he's shaped like the catcher on your slow pitch softball team. And you look at a picture of him and he looks like the bassist from a 2003 pop punk band. You know what I mean? Like he was the guitarist for Sum 41 for a couple of years and now he's playing soccer. And yet, he just does things on the field that nobody else does. Like everybody else plays straight away, and he's just doing stuff that nobody else thinks of, including getting his nose broken and bleeding everywhere.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching not just his fight and battle, but just the rapport that he and Pochettino had, during that cycle, getting his shirt on, and then after the game, and again, Pochettino's getting to learn the guys, getting to learn our grit as the country, and he's even asking us to be grittier. And then you sort of have Diego Luna show oh, I'll show you some grit. I'll break my nose and get back out there during this game. And it was cool. I really liked it. I actually really liked Brian White as well. I think his form in the league has been outstanding, and he looked to me really sharp when he came on the Venezuela game, just lively, winning balls and holding balls up. And I thought that extended to the Costa Rica outing as well. So, again, I was pretty impressed with both number 9s in different ways for these 2 games. And again, I know the competition isn't quite there, but it's still hard this time of the year to get out there and run around and be sharp and score goals. And, we had a couple of forwards that did that really well in these 2 games.
I would say Brian White is definitely ahead of Brian Gutierrez in terms of the competition to fill the U.S. men's national team's official spot of always needing a forward named Brian on the team. There's always one forward named Brian, and I think Brian White is a little bit ahead of Gutierrez in terms of the Brian competition.
And they get up and bang in a sweet header from time to time. That's all I ask.
Yep.
If their name is Brian and they're a striker for the U.S. men's national team.
And they will, at some point, probably be bleeding during a game. Like Diego Luna did that in this game, but overall, if you're named Brian playing for the U.S. men's national team, your chances of bleeding during a game are doubled, maybe even tripled.
You guys would really like my friend text group about Brian Gutierrez, because the text I got was, Brian Gutierrez looks like Timothy Chalamet playing soccer.
Oh, no. You can't unsee something like that. No. Somebody says it, and it's just like, it's over. I'll never not think about that now.
As long as you write that up in your gamer when Chicago Fire come to town later on this season, John, that's great. Timothy Chalamet, that's an awesome. So of these guys that we've talked about, maybe someone off the board that we haven't talked about as well, outside of obviously the guys who've already made U.S. men's national team camps before, who do you see getting call-ups come March and this summer from this camp, from what you saw? Manny, I'll start with you.
First of all, I think he's probably going to keep going to the leaders like Reem, and potentially, he definitely will be going to Miles Robinson. I think he
Yeah.
should be debatable as potentially a starter by 26. After that, it'll be fascinating again because we all get excited. That's where I got to be cautious here. But we got to remember the guys who are in Europe and playing at big clubs are playing at really big clubs and doing well. So this is where it gets really interesting, where he's going to have to look and see who starts sharp in the MLS season. I mean, ultimately, I think the goal is to try to navigate taking guys all over the world who are getting minutes, who are sharp, and who are hungry to fit the model of what he wants to do as a national team coach. So I think we're getting to this space where we really do have our kind of stars, the Pulisic, McKennies, the Timothy Weahs of the world. And then what are the role players around those guys to make this national team formidable in terms of being a top 10 team in the world? And so there's some guys that did really well. There's some guys that did well, but at the end of the day, it really is Venezuela and Costa Rica in the U.S. B/C teams. So I would say I can't say like somebody like completely help themselves, but I do think it's exciting for him to see somebody like McGinn score a goal like that. I think it's exciting for our two number nines to show that we maybe have more depth than you think. But it's still early days to really figure that out.
John?
There's a bunch of guys that played a lot over this January camp that I'm still not sure I would recognize if they walk by me in the hallway. So I think it's funny how January camp has changed because it wasn't that long ago that it was like, all right, 6 of the guys that played both of these games will also start. It'd be like if they had something like the Nations League back then. 6 of these guys will also start in the Nations League in March. And this year it's like, there's a lot of guys who it's possible these are their only 2 caps they're ever going to get.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get on to the Minnesota United top or portion of this show, I want to ask you one last question about your guys' preseason. What's the best soccer you watched since the last time we talked?
Like on TV?
Yeah, on TV, in person, whatnot.
You need Andy Greeter, who's the better version of this podcast when he's here and I'm not. He was like in Portugal watching soccer. You need to talk to him. I was watching stuff on TV, watching Diego Luna get headbutted in the or
You can still see good soccer, can't you, on TV? You don't have to be in person. What's the best game you guys watched? What's the most entertaining game you watched? Obviously, Man City, Benfica yesterday, or not Man City, PSG, Benfica the other day would probably top it with that craziness of that game in the Champions League.
Honestly, the highlights of that game might have been the best soccer that I saw all year. Was just sitting down and being like, it was one of those that I wished that I had not seen the score before I watched the highlights of that Barcelona Benfica game, because at no point did I have any idea what was coming next. Just a delightful experience to watch those.
Oh yeah, that would have been incredible.
I guess I'll take it and hopefully, pretend like I'm actually good at segues too here, Jonathan. And I'll say, I don't know if it's the best soccer. I have enjoyed watching the transition of the new coach at Manchester United. Specifically,
because I like the pain of others.
Yeah, well, also he's trying to navigate a new system different than Ten Hag. And where I bring that home to us, that new system is the way that Eric ended up playing at the end of last year, where it's really kind of this Christmas tree where it's 3-4, kind of like a 2-2-1, I'm sorry, 3-4-2-1. And Ruben Alvarez really focused on being like, I don't have a space for Rashford. And so my brain has really liked watching him figure out those challenges and reminding ourselves that that's kind of how we finished last year and kind of was Eric's preferred system. So I'm enjoying watching Manchester try to figure out how to get better out of that system. And then it starts to get where I'm at now. That's kind of where we ended last year with our last system that Eric played with us. So I've enjoyed that part of maybe the watching this one of the bigger clubs in the world play the same system we've been playing lately.
As someone who's a Manchester United enjoyer themselves, at least someone's enjoying what Manchester United's doing on the field because I certainly haven't been. It's been stressful to watch as this transition is. I'm excited to see where it goes, as you said, but it's been a struggle from time to time seeing this team kind of transition away from Eric Ten Hag into Amarin Ball. So let's talk about preseason, Manny. Preseason underway for the Loons reporting to camp a couple weeks ago. What are some of your past memories of preseasons, whether playing, coaching, whatnot, and what's the most important part of the preseason for you?
Yeah, I guess to give this group just a little bit of an idea, it's always a nice reminder that so you get the guys get 6 weeks off. And they're modern players now. They are taking care of their bodies. Their bodies are their livelihoods. They're not taking more than 2 weeks max, if that, probably, of not doing anything. So probably 4 or 5 days even after in December, and then they started to kind of make sure they were managing their bodies and building up for when they reported back to camp. Hopefully they got some good time with their family and R&R, but you just got to manage your bodies. And the reason why I bring that up is because it's a reminder for everybody about this sport. I think different than, say, for example, football or basketball. It is hard. It's 90 minutes of running, explosive movements, of having your brain make sure you can deal with tactical problem solving, technical problem solving, mental and physical problem solving. And when you take 6 weeks off, you need to build back up. And in general, it takes 4 to 6 weeks if you take that much time off. So I like to remind people that when they come back here, that's why we have a 6 week preseason, because these guys are now going into this like we've got to build our body back up by February 22nd. We're in the best zone to work for 90 minutes and not get injured. And again, after the season starts, you almost want to try to get fitter every week as a group and individually. But even within what they're doing now is all really concise and building into being as fit as possible in 6 weeks to start as a group, individually and collectively, to win against LAFC on February 22nd. So I love this time. I love it because it's open. The guys come in. They've got this first 5 days of freaking cold weather in Minnesota, a reminder of who we are and what they are. And then they head out for about 10 to 11 days because the reality is you got to go somewhere warm. You got to be on grass. You got to find some good opponents to play and work on both your fitness, but also your technical stuff and your tactical stuff, and all kind of combined. And it's one of my favorite times because our staff works their asses off. They're working, 2 sessions a day. They're up in the morning, then a morning session, then lunch, then a recovery session, and then another soccer session, and then guys are getting recovery sessions at night. And really, this first preseason is tough. It's just that cycle for 10 straight days, along with some games, but it's really more about the work rate, whether it's the physical loads or the technical or tactical loads. So I absolutely love it because they're in that together, and there's a little bit more equal footing because it's not necessarily about the starters versus the reserves and how we keep them both guys groups like aligned. They're kind of all equal right now. That means all of our young guys are getting a lot of cool minutes playing with first team starters. So you got some guys who were just academy players a year and a half ago, let's say like Darius Randall, and he's out there fighting and battling against Robin Lode on a daily basis. I love that kind of stuff, that kind of just interaction. So it's a cool time. I mean, but it's a roll up your sleeves and work really hard for a lot of the staff and obviously all of our players.
From the coaching aspect of this and coaching side of this, what do the coaches look to get out of this part of the schedule, this part of preseason, this early portion of preseason before, I guess, the preseason games really start to kick in? What are the coaches looking for and trying to instill in this part of the preseason?
Yeah, I think they're really kind of trying to integrate the elements of your physical capacity profile, which is so important because you're now trying to build up to getting back to the fitness of being able to play 90 minutes. So, and it's much better. They're not when I was playing, we honestly would do the first 2 weeks without a ball and just say, go run. It was just really not managed very well and not as specific it is now. So, but within that model of Eric and the technical staff creating really hard training sessions, they're also going to try to start to work in the tactical elements of the beginning of our season about how we look and how he thinks the team should play both offensively and defensively. which is super important. So he's not just doing it for his potential 11 starters right now, which later in February will be much more concise to that group. He's doing it for the whole team to give them their individual and group habits that he expects to happen. So within the physical workload, he's going to have these tactical workloads that he's really pushing on the guys as well. What is our shape defensively? How are we going to press out of certain areas? How are we going to repress out of areas? And then offensively, how does it look up for us going forward? What are the spaces we're going to go to? What are the patterns of play that we're going to try to create? And again, what I love about this first one, it is so hard to do all of that while you're so fatigued. And again, the guys are probably, crabby and a little bit and tired, but they're also really cool because they're in it together. And it's, to me, some of the best unity of the whole season because everybody's on equal footing. And if you got a good culture, everybody's pushing each other really hard every day.
For sure. Jon, you've been out when they were still back here in Minnesota. We'll talk about the trip out to Santa Barbara in a little bit. You were out at training in Blaine. What were your takeaways from what you saw and the conversations you had?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations I had, because I'm a dad and I'm from Minnesota, a lot of it was focused around the weather because the weather was awful for the first couple of days.
I love it. It was so cold.
It was so cool. And I'm dumb. Let's just say right off the top that I'm dumb because the first day, it was a Monday, the first day of training, I think it was -2 when training started. But I said to myself, they're training inside. They're in the dome. And I guess I just imagined that it was going to be, warm in there. Maybe even like a hot yoga studio, like 85, something like that. It's a dome. It's not insulated. There wasn't a lot of, R24 insulation or whatever on the side. So I got in there and I didn't have a coat and I barely had gloves and I was just freezing by the end of it. So the next day I was smart and actually dressed for the weather, but then it was just going around apologizing to people on behalf of Minnesota for the weather being so terrible.
By the way, fun fact, guys, that is the tallest dome in North America. So it is.
Oh,
it's a lot
how tall is the dome?
I don't know. All I know is you can't punt and hit the ceiling. It's that tall. So
that's a good sized challenge accepted for any Minnesota United players that want to.
Oh, they've tried.
After training.
They've tried.
They've tried. So anyway, I did think it was funny because usually we talk about the weather, you talk to players about it, and they say, well, yeah, it's cold in the winter, but wear a big jacket and get through it. And the next day, that Tuesday, I talked to Joaquin Pereira, who's, it's his first Minnesota winter, and it was -6 that day or something. And usually the quotes are pretty mild, but his quote was, it was something like, I can't get used to it. It's impossible to get up in the morning. I don't want to get out of bed. This is awful. And it's hot at home. He's from Argentina. It's hot at home. It's summer there. It's just miserable.
He's slowly becoming a Minnesotan if he's starting to complain already like that. He's perfect.
I talked to Tony Oluwaseyi as well, and you could tell, he's Canadian, but it's a little bit Minnesotan because he said, yeah, that's what it's for. You just stay inside and complain about it. I was like, yeah, that's totally right. That's exactly what we do.
So now that they've gotten out of the cold, Manny, they're out in California in Santa Barbara. What's taking place at this training camp out there in California? What's the differences between what they did in the dome up in Blaine to what they're doing on grass fields out in California right now?
Yeah, besides they are on the beach.
Warmer and wearing shorts.
Then the hotel is right on the beach, so they'll have some nice.
Must be nice.
How dare they?
No, I like I said, I think the time in Santa Barbara is you combine a couple games, where you're not as concerned as necessarily about the score, and you're really trying to manage getting guys fit and getting them their physical loaded. So, they'll build up deciding, do we play 30 or 60 minutes for some guys, and even the other guys maybe get by the end of the trip up to 70-ish minutes. I don't think any player plays a full 90 because you don't want to put them in this, what we call like a red zone for injuries. But what's cool is within that Eric really will start to plant some seeds about his philosophies for how he thinks we're going to go about navigating systems of play, patterns of play, defensive shape, where our defensive lines are going to be, where we think our pressing lines are going to be, the habits about when and how we want to repress and go through these kind of things that we did last year and hopefully do better. And have the guys' habits even be evolved from where we were last year to this year. So just a ton of work on all those different areas, ultimately, while they are going to be dealing with a lot of fatigue because their bodies do need to be stressed. They have to get fit. They have to get fitter than they were last year, and they have to get fitter than the fact that they've had 6 weeks off in some way, shape, or form. Just to let this audience know, they do have apps, and we do have workout plans for the guys throughout the entire offseason. And it's really amazing. The guys are way better than my generation in terms of staying fit and building their kind of off-season core and strength work is much better than it's ever been. And I think the what I've heard is this group really came in fitter than any group in the last 5 years.
Manny, what's your personal beep test record? What's your personal beep test high?
Well, this is controversial because I look at the beep test and everybody does it a little bit differently, and everybody. I was pretty darn good though. I mean I could get up there in the 20s, but I would say I played against some pretty impressive people. Like Frankie Haydick was one of the most insane machines I've ever seen in my entire life. Great national team player, great runner. I think he probably was the one guy I've seen that's better than anybody we've ever had on Minnesota United. But I do love when we do stuff like that because it brings out the fact that you make things competitions, and these guys want to win at everything. Everything. If you make it a competition, they want to win beep tests, they want to win long distance running, they want to win the small sided games. Yeah, that's another reason that why preseason is fun. Everybody's competing with everything they're doing.
Where does beep test day rank among your least or most desirable days in training camp in preseason?
I actually didn't. The beep test, the one thing, Jonathan, like the beep test is so quick. It's under 10 minutes long. Like it's one of those ones where you start jogging like this is super easy, and you're like, oh, this is just jogging, and you turn because you run forward about 25 yards, 25 feet-ish, I think, and you start really slow, but then overnight it becomes like I cannot believe I can't run and sprint anymore. Like, and then it's over very quickly. So to me, the beep test was never the harder. It was more like when you would do like 200s, 400s, 10 at a time. That got a little bit tough.
John, you were there for the beep test day, weren't you?
I was delighted by the number of people from the club that came out to watch everyone suffer during the beep test. Like there's always people around, but everybody was there, and everybody's watching just has a smile on their face because it's so delightful to see other people suffering so terribly and know that you don't have to. I felt bad about it because it's like you're watching these world-class athletes just absolutely miserable, and I'm just I'm trying to get the smile off my face, but I couldn't get the smile off my face because it was unbelievable to watch. The winner was a surprise. Everybody was talking before, and it was like, well, yeah, you can't bet on Will Trapp. That's like, it's like betting on the Yankees, but he was not the winner. Britton Fisher, Minnesota United 2 defender, Britton Fisher was the beep test winner, which I thought was very impressive because he was not anybody than anybody picked out. So I'm glad we can talk about this publicly and congratulate him.
I love that you saw that. Yeah, he has a bigger body type. It's harder sometimes for the bigger guys because you're turning a lot to get to the beeps and then get back again. And for the bigger guys, sometimes it's harder to get your speed up when it gets really fast. So, and
it's like center backs usually it's like it's comparative, but they're like the offensive linemen of soccer, where like just. Mostly they just don't want to run that much. Right? It seems like just watching this, it's like they're the ones that are really suffering. And then there's Britton Fisher just beating everybody.
And Will Trapp's like, what? How am I losing to a center back?
I haven't talked to Will Trapp since then, but I'm guessing he's furious. I would imagine that he's totally furious.
Yeah. I don't want you to give away any inside details, but of this current squad. But Manny, back in your day, was there rewards or punishments for being the first out in the beep test or winning the beep test?
I mean, yes,
that you can say on camera anyway.
The statute of limitations is expired.
I think the way I'll look at it is like, I played with Carlos Valderrama. That guy did his beep test in a fat suit, like he was trying to lose weight, and he's jogging the whole time. Like there's no other sprint. So my brain is just like, it's much better, more organized, and everybody's tighter nowadays. Like we had some amazing fit guys. We had some guys who came back into the beep test, and it was like they didn't go past jogging. They didn't sprint once. Like they were out like after 3 minutes. Like it was just a little bit different era back then. That's all. So
Carlos Valderrama riding a bike on this beep test and still
oh,
finishing last.
amazing. Yeah, and I loved him by the way, but that's just how they work. That was the preseason back then was used to get fit. It is no longer the case. The guys have to be fit, and preseason now is used to kind of integrate your mental and physical loads with that tactical and technical acumen that I just talked about. And that's why it is pretty cool. And they'll come back home now in about a week, take some time here, train. I think we have to give them 3 days off no matter what, so they can recover a little bit and be with family. And then we go back out, I think, to Palm Springs for the last one where they play 3 games. And those 3 games really build up to right before we play the LAFC. So it's a little bit different vibe, the second leg of preseason than this first one. But again, you're right. It is. I love the time right now because a lot of people are on equal footing. A lot of people are working their butts off to show and the staff what they've done and how they've improved over the offseason.
So back to the team on the pitch and the coaching staff, Eric Ramsey actually getting a preseason this year. What's different for him, obviously, other than just having the preseason? What's different from what you guys have noticed from being there at practice from him, and what's he been able to do differently this year now that he's having a full preseason under his belt ahead of this season? What do you expect to be different from him going into this season now that he's had a preseason to get his team ready, Manny?
Well, I think he's got a great idea what the level of league. He knows this group really well. Obviously there's always this time of year you're still working on last details of the roster build and last details of certain areas in the field that we know we're going to have to get better at and add depth or add starters. So we're still in that process, and Eric's still probably in both that process of there might be 1 or 2 potential starters still left to build in the roster. But the nice thing is he knows this roster really well now. I mean, he really knows a lot of the guys, a lot of the group back that he's worked with for a long time. So I think this ability to work for 6 straight weeks is probably even a little foreign to him. I don't know if in Europe they have that amount of time off like we do. So I think he's really dialed in on what he wants to accomplish every day, every week, and every cycle leading up to this LAFC game. I think their staff is really probably now really aware of how they're going to try to work and build into getting ready for this game on the 22nd of February.
John, I know you were out there and talking to players. And what was your takeaway from some of these guys who came in midseason last year, who now get a full preseason with this squad? How are they adjusting to having this preseason to get kind of acclimated even more with this team before the actual season starts?
Yeah, I think the visible difference is just sort of how comfortable everybody is, not only with the system but with each other a little bit. Whenever you bring in new guys, and last year was just sort of ins and outs and all over the place, and even Ramsey himself coming in and needing to get used to what is not only a new job but also his first job, just sort of settling in. It feels like a very different vibe now than it was even at the end of last year, just in the sense that everybody knows what the levels are. Everybody knows what to expect. Everybody knows what is expected of them. And especially as you come into another transfer window here where there may or may not be more Minnesota United players coming in, I think that is... I know Khalid El-Ahmad has talked a lot about continuity and how that's the thing that's going to sort of kick them on to the next level. And you can see some of that, at least familiarity, that is pretty evident in terms of you think they're starting at the beginning for preseason, but the training sessions that I was at last week looked like they could have been mid-season. They wouldn't have looked out of place last September in terms of everybody's skills and everybody's familiarity and how everybody's training. So...
Are you ready to take your Loons fandom to the next level? Join Minnesota United's official season ticket waitlist, The Preserve, for just $25 to get early access to tickets and first shot at securing available season tickets in 2026. Visit MNUFC.com/tickets/preserve to become a member today. Yeah. And I know 40 minutes into this, people want to hear about some of these new guys that have come in so far through the draft and re-entry draft. And I know there hasn't been a whole lot of new faces in, but there are been a couple to talk about. Mainly Kip Keller came in through the re-entry draft and some of these draft picks. Manny, what can you tell us about what these guys can bring to this roster between Kip Keller and the 4 draft picks from the draft this year?
Yeah, I mean it's specifically those two groups are unique in their own way, and obviously the college draft to me is always so important because it's a pathway in this country to get to high level soccer, and we certainly have starters on our team from the college draft. So it is a very important pathway. I think it has a lot of ability. I think now you actually have that pathway. If you can't quite make it the first year or two and you're in the first team, you actually have the second team to really prove that you should be on the pathway to become the starter in MLS. Um, and it's exciting. I always love the college kids because it's still growing there. The college game is expanding and getting better facilities and training more year round. And with the summer season they have now, they play more, so they're becoming getting more polished. It's harder to find some of the talent though because obviously the kids are going to the academies and not going to college as much. But then it gets bigger again because then there's all these foreigners coming, so it's exciting. So to me, it's a great pathway to get to MLS. And all of our college draft picks and guys, I think are exciting prospects, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes with the preseason. Kip Keller's a cool one because he's a Midwest kid who it hasn't been the best easy run as people expected for his pro career. And he's got a lot of talent, he's got a lot of potential, and he's on his third team now in X amount of years in MLS, where it's a big moment. This is a big moment where I hope we have the right culture and environment to bring out the best in him. And I certainly hope he takes advantage of the fact that, he's probably got to really dial in his time here. And we need him. We need depth at center back. We need, I think, really good up and coming American kids as well. So I'm excited for him. I think he's going to add a lot to the culture. I think he's at a time in his career where it's a big moment for him to show that he can play at the MLS level and grow into it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Couple other off-season notes to take a note of. Will Trapp, Banguhukle Hlongwane, Taniela Washe, that one happened a while ago, but those guys signing extensions to remain with the team. What do you guys, John, I'll start with you. When you're looking at this roster, I know you've reported on some of the rumored incomings, and speak on those if you want to. What do you think this roster, looking at it with 30 days left to go until the season starts, what do you think it needs when you look at it and heading into this season?
I think the main one that everybody's been looking at, and this really goes back to last summer too, is sort of that central midfield area. That was pretty much the preserve of Trapp and Hassani Dotson last season, and not that those guys did poorly, but that Minnesota's going to be looking at that and going, even if you're trying to prepare for injuries, one of those guys goes down and you're already sort of plugging holes a little bit, which you saw some of last year in the sense that those holes would end up getting plugged by Robin Lode, who's, probably better served being one of the wide forwards in this setup, or Carlos Harvey, who's sort of starting to make a place for himself as an outside center back. And it's not that you can't move those guys around. It's just maybe that's not necessarily how you want to address these things. You'd rather have guys who are young and hungry and competitive playing in those central midfield roles. So I think that especially central midfield is the key one that you're looking at and saying, I think they're probably going to add one or two players just to have not just to have bodies, but to have some competition and some pushing forward in the central midfield.
Manny?
I think John has been in and around a team, and he's got some good observation skills in terms of there's some nice continuity coming back, and I don't want to say depth, but I think if we want to get better, that's an area of the field that's really important for us to continue to build and find value and talent, both starters and reserves, and it will help us both, play whatever kind of systems and style that Eric wants to play. We're going to need depth there. We'll also need probably new starters if we want to push our way up the West for sure. So I just have to agree. I mean, I know this is the first show, and I want to be like, John, I disagree, but I would have to agree. And obviously, center back is somewhere too. I think we're gonna have to find some depth. And we talked about Keller, and I still think we got to make sure we have a few more, just to make sure again, we're really getting better defensively every year, and better in the midfield are two massively important spots.
I think you also look a little bit at right wing back, and there's sort of not an open question exactly, but sort of a question of saying, is the season finished with Bongi playing there as the right wing back? Is that the right role for him? Is that the best role for him? Can it still be adapted to fit what he's good at? I think those are all possibilities, but you look at it and say, maybe more than any other role on the field, there's not necessarily someone that you say, yes, absolutely, that guy is our first choice at that spot. Obviously, Longwane played there. Obviously, Songmin Jong has played there. Obviously, they have Matush Kamech, who came in partway through last year, who didn't really establish himself as a first-team option, but now he's got a preseason, and where's he going? DJ Taylor is still in the fold. They've got a number of different options, but it's not in the way that maybe some of the other positions on the field are like, yeah, this is who played at the end of last year. This is also who will play there to begin the year. I think right wing back is probably the most open question in terms of if they were playing a game 2 days from now on Saturday, of which player is going to slot in right there.
For sure.
I actually think it's really cool that you brought it up, John, because it's a little bit why I kind of brought up the Manchester United and why I like following them, is because the Marcus Rashford saga is a really, to me, important saga, because it was basically, I remember, like, you're going to have to adapt and survive or you will not make it. And ironically, I think Bongi will, and I think on paper, I think he's going to be fitter than he came in last year. I think there was some chunkiness with the national team and things that just set him back a couple, and I mean a really good 2 or 3 months before he got really fit to show what he could do. I'm excited to see how he does in this position now, coming in really fit and really hungry and really understanding Eric's expectation of a wing back position. I don't think he's going to be like a Marcus Rashford, who was like, I'm not going to embrace doing this. I think Bongi is. I think Sang-bin did. So to me, both those guys, I think, have a chance to show that might be some good solutions for us in that position if we always play with that system. Certainly, we might change systems, and those guys might be able to play a little bit more of their kind of wing forward positions as well. But I do like and believe that we got a hungry Bongi understanding it a little bit more, which I think has a better chance to really get off the ground running, as opposed to last year. It took a long time for him to really understand it.
For sure. It'll be certainly interesting to watch how that develops over the next 30 days ahead of that game out in LAFC, or out in LA against LAFC, to kick off the 2025 regular season. Before we go to more league notes, we haven't had a chance to talk about the schedule. What are your guys' general takeaways from the schedule? Obviously, Messi coming to town, I know, is the big note, but outside of that, maybe, what are your big takeaways from what you saw in the schedule? Manny, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm starting with that. I'm sorry. Like,
that's fine. Go ahead.
It's
the marketing department is standing there with a cattle prod ready to hit Manny if he doesn't mention that first.
No, there's no cattle prod. But I mean, honestly, it's the greatest player in the history of our sport. Coming to the Twin Cities at a time when the weather is nice, at a time when there's no national team games. So really, Messi's playing here. They don't have multiple games that week. He just has to be healthy. And then we get to have the greatest player in the history of sports in Minnesota. I couldn't be more excited for all of Minnesotans. I will tell you, internally, it was a really tough decision to decide to either have this game at Allianz Field or take it to some bigger stadium and think about the financial ramifications. And I think in the end, this game went because Allianz Field is such a special place, and we have such special partners and a club that we value revenue. We need it, but we also value what's happened in the last 10 years. And I'm looking at John being like, coming up to the NFC 10 years ago, we could never imagine having Lionel Messi playing against our Minnesota Sports Pro soccer team at a modern, maybe the best stadium in the country. It blows my mind. So yes, I'm going to start with that. Unbelievable. Super excited. It's going to be one of those special days in Minnesota soccer, if not the most special. There you go. How was the marketing pitch, John? Did I do well?
That was good. I'm fired up now.
Okay, good. Nice. I'll start with that. I'll let John add to whatever his schedule.
Now, the schedule, it gets funnier every year, and obviously adding San Diego FC to the Western Conference makes it's even in the sense that both the Eastern and Western conferences are the same now, in that you play 28 games against your conference and then 6 against the other conference. And it's like Minnesota could play almost as many games against Mexican teams this season as they do against Eastern Conference teams. And it really, it's funny watching league news and stuff as well as you're trying to sort of track what's going on. And you've got like Chicho Arango and Yusuf Martinez moving to San Jose. And it's like, all right, that's a big deal because Minnesota is going to play San Jose twice this season. And then there's 8 teams in the Eastern Conference that Minnesota's not even going to see this season. It gets stranger and stranger every year. And I don't know that there's a good solution to it, but it really looks more and more like MLS is 2 leagues with a scheduling arrangement. Like, oh, yeah, you've got it's the Big Ten and the SEC, and then there's the Big Ten ACC Challenge that happens in February or whatever, where the Gopher basketball team plays Boston College. It feels a little bit more like that every single season.
For sure. You mentioned some of those notes and transactions from across the league. Chicho Arango, Yosef Martinez going to San Jose. San Jose making a number of big changes this season.
The redemption tour, the Earthquakes redemption tour.
Bruce Arena,
Chicho Arango, all these guys. Do they have it? It's a movie. You should make a movie out of this Earthquake season. Getting the band back together one more time. All these grizzled old veterans trying to get it together.
I get older, things stay the same way. That's how.
Do we think this is too many moves in one offseason for a team? I mean, Bruce Arena bringing in a lot of the New England players that he worked with back in his New England Revolution days, bringing in a couple other big league stars who have had their moments in this league. Is there an argument to be made that that's a lot of moves in one offseason for one team to try and gel in before the season starts, Manny? Or John? John, you go first.
I want to say, go look at last year's standings and then see if you think San Jose Earthquakes continuity is a good idea.
That's fair. That there is an argument for that too, but there's also that's a lot of new faces in one place to try and mesh into one squad. That feels like a really tough task. If anybody could do it, it's probably Bruce Arena, the guy who's been around longer than anybody. But
so, Jonathan, I don't want to make this a love fest with Marthaler and I, but instead of go back 1 year, go back 10 years.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, no.
Or the Bruce Arena play. At the end of the day, it's a plan. It's an iconic coach, and it's a vision that they haven't had in a long time. And they're addressing their defensive issues. They're trying to find some better value on offense, and then it's Bruce. Can he manage and build that into a unit and group? He's really good at it. So, again, I would say it's a fascinating Western Conference this year. I think it's going to be really, really competitive like last year. I do think the LA teams are feeling like they are really starting to try to dial in, pushing ahead of everybody else. But then I get so impressed with the rest of the West because everybody's trying to get in their own identity, even us, which I get excited about. So I don't know where San Diego falls in that, but we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they do. It seems like they've done some pretty good stuff, but it's hard to be an expansion team.
Outside of the conversation around San Jose that we just had, what's been the move of the offseason for you that you've seen come into the league? Is it Wilfred Zaha going to Charlotte FC, Luca De La Torre going to San Diego FC, what they've done in trying to put together a roster ahead of their inaugural season? What's been the move that kind of took your eye a little bit across this league? John,
I'll start with John for sure. John, you can start with
the moves that took my eye this offseason are the number of MLS teams that managed to take sort of problem cases or problem contracts and somehow sell them to somewhere south of the border for $10 million. Is unbelievable. The number of guys who are like, well, I don't know what they're going to, they sold Driussi for 10 million? Like,
selling Mateusz Bagush for what, 9, I believe? It was an incredible
Alan Polito went for anything. Like, I thought this, Sporting Kansas City was sort of in the case. I think they would have driven him anywhere he wanted to go. Like, no, that's fine. You don't need to pay us. We'd be happy just to get rid of the and then Chivas bought him for a number of dollars, a large number of dollars. I couldn't believe the number of contracts this year. I was like, boy, I don't know what they're going to, they sold him for a lot. Okay. And then you turn around, and I'm not saying that I love Brandon Vasquez. I think he's a great player, but just looking at the sums that are being thrown around now, it's like, I didn't see that coming. And like I say, he's like the white whale for so many of us in terms of being the potential future for the U.S. men's national team at striker. Like I'm ready to get my Brandon Vasquez jerseys out and just start waving that flag again. But some of the money that's getting thrown around this offseason, I can't quite believe.
Manny?
Yeah, I mean, I first just to follow with John's point, I think it's another example. People don't realize how fast and how big MLS is getting, and that the rest of the world is taking notice. And we're not just buying, Suarez and the older players. We actually are buying some younger guys who are coming to their prime. And there's markets and leagues around the world that are recognizing they might have, Jerisi might have ended his kind of like value at Austin, but there's high level teams in South America like, no, that guy's got another level for us that we're ready to pay a lot of money for, because it's hard to find that value in talent. So it is pretty amazing and cool. And then it's a great debate about what do you use like with that money that Austin gets. Vander Assets feels a little bit pricey, but guess what? They're trying to get better than they had been the last couple of years, so they might overpay for value and talent to get back to the top echelons of the West. So it's a fascinating one for me. I was intrigued by I get older, but things stay the same, and that would be kind of the same vibe as San Jose and Seattle Sounders. So for me, we already mentioned the San Jose and Bruce Arena. He grabbed some of his talent from New England. He's grabbed these guys who are trying to recalibrate their careers and get the best out of them with Durango and Martinez. And Seattle goes out and gets the young Americans that might have the same value. And with the replacement of Ferreira for Rudy Diaz, like, I'm just like, gosh, that's so Seattle, what they did. It just
They're just gonna the jerseys are just gonna be, instead of purple or whatever they were last year, Seattle's just gonna wear red, white, and blue because they're just assembling the U.S. men's national team second team up there.
Exactly. And it'll probably have a good identity for what they're trying to do.
And I also, it's funny. I want to mention this as well. Manny, you said, like, can you believe from 10 years ago that the best player in the world is coming to Minnesota? That's one way of looking at it. But here's the I can't believe this happened moment of the offseason for me was the Loons Miguel Tapias, obviously a guy who played a lot for the Loons over the last 2 seasons. But by the end of last season in the playoffs, he was sort of the center back depth, the first guy off the bench. They weren't using him come down the stretch and in the playoffs. And Minnesota United sold a defender who is, kind of surplus to requirements, is the way they were thinking of him, to Chivas. And not only did they sell him to Chivas, he started the first game of the season. He just went into the Chivas lineup. That is as unbelievable as Lionel Messi coming to Minnesota to play a soccer game. It's a guy that Minnesota is selling because they don't need him going into the Chivas lineup. That's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, I think it's showing that where MLS and League of X in a weird way, but it's also just a reminder, it is hard to find value in talent, and it takes a job 24/7 to do it. And the league is finding and developing, and for good players, like Tapias was, it wasn't quite the right profile by the way we want to build and grow our team. But for Chivas, they're starved for talent and for experience, and for Tapias is a really good, smart center back. So. You're right. It's just amazing. We are part of the global game, guys. No 2 ways about it. We're right in the full thick of it. And, I think our roster, even we didn't even talk about Yeboah yet, who we're just excited that he evolves even more into, kind of the great second half of the season and somebody that, potentially could become one of the better strikers in this league. So Minnesota is part of the global soccer game, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this team develops and all the news that comes around this team over the next 30 days and heading up and leading up to that season opener in Los Angeles against LAFC on February 22nd. I cannot wait for the season to get started. It feels like it's been, I know it's only been, 6-7 weeks. It feels like it's been longer since we last saw Minnesota United, and can't wait for that to start. I'm super happy to be back here talking to you guys every week. Looking forward to more of these conversations right here on the Sound of the Loons podcast and the Matchday Preview. Guys, we'll talk to you later on. Appreciate you guys stopping by.
Cheers, guys. Well done.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks again to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Evan Entler, and Kyle Hayward for putting this on, and we'll talk to you later, Loons fans.